Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome in to another episode of Pucks and Prosecco. I'm Meghan Angley, joined by Chloe Theil. She made it down the mountain. She was almost snowed in Theil, was it?
We were in Vail, so I don't know if anybody listens to any sort of EDM, but we went to John's Summit on Saturday. And then Sunday, it was really bad. They were opening and closing the pass, and then they closed I-70, then reopened it, and then closed it again, reopened it. So we spent 6-7 hours on our drive yesterday, all for me to make it down for the show.
I'm so glad you made it, one, safely. Two, in decent time, though it sounds like it was a bit of a trek getting here.
It was a trek.
But how was the show?
It was okay. I mean, the main performer, he only came on for, I swear it was maybe 45 minutes. So it was a 3-4 hour long show, but he only played for 30 minutes. So it wasn't the best. And I did in turn miss the Canada-USA game, which was the worst part about it.
I didn't think of that.
That was the worst part because I was debating if I would rather do one or the other.
We talked about this. You might be like live streaming it on your phone at the concert.
Yes. So we did end up leaving a little bit early, and I was able to catch the very end of the game. So that was good.
That's really exciting. I also saw clips, and I don't know if it was of the same show. Was it actively snowing during the concert?
Yes. And that was really fun. You know, it had lasers and stuff that kind of shot through the snow, and it was beautiful.
The 3-4 hours.
3-4 hours, 30 minutes. Gotta give and take.
Yeah, I could see that adding up kind of quickly. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to kick off the show just with a quick Four Nations check-in.
Yes.
Honestly, because the USA-Canada game was so much fun. I know I didn't get to see it in its entirety.
I basically watched the entire thing just after I knew who won. So
I love it.
Yes.
So what were your initial thoughts? Some fights right off the drop? 3 fights in 9 seconds?
I mean, it's just so... It's so intense. It's on a level I feel like I've never even seen before. And it felt like both of them were playing like they had something to prove, which they did. You're playing for your country, but the physicality was on another level. The emotions were so high, and it was just so fun to watch. The 3 fights were chaos.
Yes.
I think it was more fun that there were the 3 fights in the 9 seconds instead of them just starting and everybody was fighting, that they kind of waited each time for the puck to drop again and then started another fight. So I thought that was interesting.
I think that's a fun call because it did add a little bit of a surprise. Like, wait, another one? Wait, another one? They could have just all at once simultaneously.
Exactly. It was kind of better. They each wanted their moment.
They wanted their moment.
They wanted the spotlight.
Our little USA divas, which made me wonder, before the tournament, you were kind of slanted towards Team Canada. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of Avalanche players represented there. Did this make you feel a little bit of a soft spot for USA at all?
Oh, 100%. And what I love about this and what's so exciting about having this game on Thursday is that either way, this game for me is a win-win.
Yes.
I think about it that way because it's either the country that I live in that wins or the country that contains so many Avs players that I know and love and the best in the NHL to win. So I think either way, no matter who you're cheering for on Thursday, it's going to be so fun regardless of who wins.
I think so too. And this tournament has sort of gone off the rails with injuries piling up and a lack of clarity around what the rules are. I guess to be fair, I think the rules are clear. Like now Quinn Hughes is going to Boston to potentially draw in because Charlie McAvoy is hurt, but they'll need one more player to be injured for that to actually happen. But I still love kind of the chaos of what's going on. This player was ruled out from the tournament. Now he's appearing in the final hour for the Canada-USA rematch. It feels perfectly written, like for a story.
Yes, I absolutely love it. And I just think about, I keep seeing people talking about this too, but the NFL has Pro Bowl, the NBA did like All-Star week last week. And for most of those things, like the best players don't even play, and people don't really want to watch people like compete in skills contests and stuff like that. This is what people want to watch.
Yeah.
It's so insane, and it's so fun. And hearing even all of that kind of stuff with Quinn Hughes potentially coming in, it's so exciting, and you just want to know what's going to happen next, because like, is some player just randomly going to get sick and not be able to play tomorrow, or are they just going to kind of fight through it? It's just so interesting.
It is really interesting. I'll be curious to see who's genuinely healthy come Thursday, because the Tkachuk's got kind of banged up, and Austin Matthews also looked at with precautions. Yes. So I have a feeling, though, they're just holding out for the big game, and that was sort of the reason for the precaution.
100%.
Because both teams are taking this so seriously. Yeah. They want to bring their very best for this big game coming up.
And even Austin Matthews not playing last night, I thought that this feels like a Stanley Cup final.
Doesn't
right
it?
Now. Like, you guys are holding off playing your best players because of a potential injury or illness, because you know you're already in and you want to have your best people to put forward in the championship. It's just, there's so much energy around it that makes it feel like a playoff or a final game.
It does have that intensity. I'll be curious too on the Canada side of it. There are players who've won before on both sides of the aisle, but certainly represented on Team Canada, to include Nathan MacKinnon, who's having an incredible tournament. But I think that we'll just see that intensity that's been present throughout the tournament ratchet up to a playoff level Game 7 vibes on Thursday.
I'm so excited.
Game 7 Stanley Cup final. That's going to be a huge one. I'm really excited for it.
We might have to have a watch party here.
That's something. A fabulous idea.
We have to do something.
Yeah, because I felt like games last night, I wasn't able to tune in as locked in as I normally was. And I kind of felt, USA is not even really playing their full lineup. It's fine. Right. But Thursday, I will be locked in. We should do a watch party.
We should. That would be really fun.
I think, too, something interesting is the teams reporting back to their respective clubs, with exception of the players in the tournament, essentially today. Like, they're supposed to check in some degree by the afternoon, and they're practicing here in Colorado tomorrow. So I think it is interesting that they're resuming team activities while Nathan MacKinnon's, competing in this tournament, Makar, Taves. So I do wonder what the difference in intensity will be like even when the players return from the break, because you've got guys who are in Cabo and you've got guys who are like playing like their life depends on it.
Right. And I think that is something that they need to bring back. There needs to be this intensity from the start, especially going in back-to-back games. The fire that comes with playing for your country, it needs to feel like that every single night in the NHL. Like, you're fighting for your team. So that the physicality, it's like they don't need to drop the gloves every single game. Yes.
No.
But they do need to, like, push back when things get chippy, and it's just all about the fire that comes with this that I hope they bring back to their teams.
I wasn't even looking at the chat, so I apologize. I just tuned in. But the goalie situation is something I think we'll talk about on the Friday show, because Team Canada, I think, really, they put themselves in a tough spot. Obviously, they still have such a strong chance in this tournament, but Binnington is a little bit of a liability and hasn't been totally trusted in net. I think Hellebuck looked fallible too, though, last night. We've obviously seen in the Winnipeg series that the goaltending can be an interesting decision maker in how this game shakes out.
Yeah.
And the goalie duel of it all will be kind of fun to watch.
I think that's the only thing that Team Canada doesn't have right now. I think the goaltending is not really there, but the rest of it is. So I definitely think it'll be interesting to have, a goaltender. Did they confirm who's starting tomorrow? Thursday?
No.
Okay.
I'm assuming going back to Binnington. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. They might have left some good goaltenders on the table by making goaltending decisions, around a little bit of, I don't want to call it politics, but there are definitely personal reasons behind the decision making. And I think it happened so early on that I don't know that people expected Mackenzie Blackwood and Logan Thompson to play as well as they have this year. Yeah. So I think there will be some learning lessons about how roster decisions, especially around goaltending, get made for this tournament, that maybe that's one that can happen a little bit closer to the start of the tournament based upon who's hot, and I'm sure they'll still go back to the trusted goalies and ways too. But that'll be an interesting storyline for Team Canada.
I think so too. And, Bennington maybe gets another chance. It's his rematch, so maybe he'll step up to the plate on Thursday.
I'm excited to see it, and I'm also excited to see how this team looks coming back from break. You mentioned it. They have back-to-back games coming up this weekend on the road. We were told that Valnatushkin was a possibility to return after the Four Nations break. We'll be waiting to see more with the practices coming up, if that's real. Is Val's pals back? Because I'm sure you guys have seen, we're digging into some silly, fun things with the roster construction a little bit later, but Val being a part of this team moving forward is a part of that conversation. So I did want to very realistically ask you where you felt the Avs' biggest needs were right now.
I think it's just, it does need more intensity, like I mentioned before, but I think we're still in the process of kind of figuring out the depth scoring. So not only that, but also like defensive stability too.
Yeah.
Like what you guys had mentioned before we went on the break was, sending some guys like Sam Malinsky. Maybe it's a good break for him. Maybe he'll come back and just be a little bit better. But I think it's really the questions of, so you played in your tournament, right? And now you're coming back and your problems are still there with your own team. And they didn't make any moves over the break. McFarland didn't really do anything, which I don't know if anybody assumed that he would do something, but all of the concerns are still there.
Yeah.
So I think it's good for them to come back, especially, if Team Canada happens to win and you have, Nate and Cale and Taves coming back and they're kind of riding a high. But coming back and playing in a back-to-back immediately, that's kind of, it's really going to highlight weaknesses.
I think so too. When the Avs have to deal with rest versus rust conversations coming out of holiday breaks or all-star game breaks, they usually are a team that is a bit rusty. The rest doesn't always benefit them. I feel like the players that would benefit the most are the players who don't get it. Like, I think Cale Makar would have thrived if he got this week and a half break that the other players got. But I will be curious to see how they respond to having gotten the rest. Players like Malinsky, who I feel we've seen so much better, especially at the start of the year. And it felt like some of the consistency in his game had waned and it was just a little bit up and down going into the break. Has that stabilized? Was a mental reset all that he needed? But I think you're exactly right. It feels like everybody's kind of on a short leash in terms of evaluation for what the Avs' needs are, to include a player like Casey Mittelstadt.
Yes.
Who has not had the season that any of us would have hoped after the deadline last year and then into the playoffs. This was a player who made so much sense in Colorado, but it just hasn't been the year that anyone, including Casey Mittelstadt, probably would have hoped. And that runway, I think, has run out. I think we're at the decision-making timeline.
I agree.
And with Casey, I think it is going to be a big tell this weekend how he comes back from the break, because his name's already come up in trade boards and murmurs of things. And the market for a center ahead of this deadline is interesting. There are lots of teams in a really desperate place for a center, whereas I think the Avs are very desperate to fill the 2C position in a way that they trust. But I think there are teams in actually more a place of desperation that, despite Casey not having the year that we'd hoped, I think he holds more value than people realize, not just to Colorado, but even potentially in a trade situation. This is a player with first-round pedigree who has had more productive and better seasons. I think even going back to last deadline, Casey Mittelstadt was, in a sense, the belle of the ball. Like, he wasn't expected to the belle of the ball. Thank you, Chloe. He wasn't expected to be moved. Buffalo was like, yeah, we're not shopping Casey Mittelstadt, and then they did. And so in that way, people didn't necessarily expect it, but this was a player that a lot of teams were interested in and were hoping that Buffalo would be taking calls on. And there's a reason for that. I want to give Casey Mittelstadt, the player past this season, some credit. And there was reason for that, alongside the acknowledgement that Casey Mittelstadt had trouble carrying his team from the top of the lineup in Buffalo. You know, people felt like he was viewed as a leader and maybe more of a veteran player despite being so young, that they wanted to carry a 1C, 2C spot, but he struggled with that much responsibility. And so when he came here, there was this hope that, all right, you don't have to be the 1C in Colorado.
Right.
You can be a 2C backseat to Nathan MacKinnon, who's really doing the heavy lifting here. And so I think that people, if they could acknowledge that about Casey Mittelstadt before in Buffalo, I think he holds more value than people realize. I guess I wonder where you're at with the Casey Mittelstadt situation.
I kind of feel like I'm in the same boat. I don't want to be too quick to send him out the door, you know? I think when we first traded for him, I thought he did a phenomenal job, and I think he's in a tough spot, and I do think that they need to do something, but you know, if he stays, he's probably not gonna stay 2C. That's just kind of the reality of how it's been going. But if he gets bumped down to 3C, maybe, then what happens with Drury? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It kind of, you know, it means like shuffling the lineup in a way where everybody else gets affected because of the way he plays. But at the same time, you know, trading him means kind of, you know, going all in on a cup run, basically, and, you know, bringing in a more established piece and hoping that it works. And so, yeah, I kind of feel the same way. It really depends on the faith you have that Mittelstadt will perform in the playoffs. And I just am not sure if I have that.
I haven't seen enough to have that.
Exactly.
And when I look around the league at what most 2Cs on a given team look like, they require a little bit of seasoning, a little bit of cooking. Even Nazem Kadri, early in Colorado, it took him a little bit of time to ascend to the level of play that we saw in the Cup run.
Yeah.
And so I think Casey Mittelstadt's just a little too young for what the Avs need him to be right now. I think this is a player that has 2-seed upside still in his future, but I don't think he has that capability right this second. And that's why I think he could make sense on a different team that has a little bit more runway to give him those reps, because to your point, you used the word established. I think they might need to sacrifice filling the 2C position for the future, because that was the whole point of Casey Mittelstadt. They extend him. We've got a 2C option now locked in for the foreseeable future. We don't have to worry about it anymore. I don't think we'll ever stop worrying about the Avs 2C, to be honest with you, because now we're in a different position. Let's say they trade Casey Mittelstadt, they bring in a more established player.
Right.
He's only got, because he's going to be a little bit older. You know, if we're looking at like a Ryan O'Reilly type, I'm even interested to see if this tournament has showcased some options that maybe people aren't talking about, like a Gustav Nyquist. But either way, they're on the back 9 of their career. And so they're a 2C established right now, like a Ryan O'Reilly. But for how much longer? You know, that still doesn't solve the position in the future, which is what I think the front office was hoping to do, but they might have to cut their losses in that way.
So do you, realistically, what do you think that they can get for him at this point?
I won't put like a person or a number around it. I just think that it's going to be more equal to Casey Mittelstadt before this season, the draft pedigree and the track record before it, and also taking into account his age and his upside. You know, the high IQ playmaking Casey Mittelstadt that, when at his best, is a little bit more engaged than we've seen this season, I think will fetch a more comparable return. I think people are like viewing Casey Mittelstadt as Ryan Johansson last year. Like, we will be giving up a first round pick just to get rid of this player. I don't view it in the same way. And I actually want to even remind ourselves of like just how bad the Ryan Johansson situation was for a second. We're in a different room. I think that Casey Mittelstadt has so much more value than a Ryan Johansson, to where the Avs still turned Johansson into Sean Walker and helped to shore up the 3rd/2nd pairing with him. So not necessarily bad business, but I think the Avs can do better business than that with Casey Mittelstadt.
Yeah. I hope that, do you think the return will be, like, will it cover for them getting rid of Byram?
Yeah.
Or is it their payoff is gonna be a lot lower? I don't know.
That's such an interesting point, because Byram's name has come up in trade talks too. It feels like both sides weren't fully happy with the fit. And on Byram's side of it, I don't think Byram's having a bad year. I just think the fit isn't making as much sense as they'd hope. Honestly, I wondered about the fit too, because Buffalo's back end has young talent. They've got a couple right shot options. I thought that it would be a little bit backlogged for Byram there. I certainly felt it was backlogged for Byram here, though, too. So I maintain that I don't think Byram would have worked in Colorado long term, because I think he had his sights set on being a top pair defenseman, and that just wasn't going to happen in Colorado, barring some crazy circumstance, and it certainly wasn't going to happen anytime soon. So for that reason, I hope the Avs aren't feeling too much remorse over the deal. It just feels like it didn't really work out for either side, but I still think flipped, it wouldn't have really worked out.
Yeah.
But I do think they're going to have to be a little bit aggressive in the Casey Mittelstadt situation. It does feel like I'm looking at my watch and it's decision-making time.
I completely agree.
No matter what decision they make, they're taking a chance. They're taking a gamble. So there isn't a sure bet. There isn't a safe choice for the Avs with respect to the 2C position.
Yeah. And especially, coming up on the deadline, if they have to make a move, I think that's part of the move to make.
I fully agree. And I love the call out around defense. We're going to talk about that more in just a second around a slight shift in gears. But Cujo mentions Mason. Whoa. McTavish. Sorry, words are very hard for me. And I love this player so much. If that was ever an option for Colorado, I think he would be such a great fit. I don't know for like a 2C, but I also feel like he's being limited in his ceiling in Anaheim, being described as more of a depth piece third line player. And I think he has more upside than they're giving him credit for. And that is my McTavish rant for the day.
I also think Cole Sillinger is great too.
He's in it, I think I have Tate McRae blinders on. I'm like, you dirty dog. And you know what? It's fine. I'm going to set that aside for a second.
It is hard to set aside. I completely agree.
No, because he is a good player. I feel bad. He's a good young player.
But at the same time, most of the reason why I know who he is because of Tate McRae.
Interesting. Same. Okay, Tate McRae. What a great segue into our next topic, because we set the table on the podcast yesterday with Jesse a little bit what the Avs needs are. And honestly, it feels like we're all kind of in agreement as to what those are and what positions then they might be looking to fill, what types of players they might be looking at to do as much. And what we haven't considered is looking at the astrological makeup of the Colorado Avalanche.
Which it just makes so much sense. If you don't really know what's going on, you just have to take a look at the astrological signs, right?
It's true. And so I want to prime this portion of the podcast with a few disclaimers. One, take what resonates and leave what doesn't. If you don't believe in astrology, it's perfectly okay. I still want you to buckle up and have some fun with us for a second. Suspend your disbelief and come along for the ride, because you're certainly invited. But I also want to encourage everyone to be respectful, because astrology can be fun, but there are people who believe it and practice it and teach it almost as a field of study. I'm not a teacher of astrology. I enjoy it more as a passive interest. I find it interesting. And so the way that I see it is, I'm a big pattern recognition person. So when I look at sports betting, for example, I think there's a lot of pattern recognition at play in sports betting. People will look at Nathan McKinnon's shots per game over the last 10 and make a bet over under on his shots per game for the next. And you're looking at pattern recognition, and there are tangible numbers, but also I think sometimes people wake up and they look at the app and they just go off of a feeling. They go off of a gut instinct. And I think that's okay too. I also just genuinely endorse listening to your intuition.
But lately my intuition has not been right about sports betting. So maybe I should stick to the patterns.
Stick to the pattern recognition. And I think astrology is at its core pattern recognition. And so that's why I'm using sports betting as a parallel, because if you do it based on just gut feeling, or you're looking at some kind of pattern recognition, doesn't matter. Like, have fun. The importance is to have fun. And I don't want to dunk on something that is predominantly associated as being a woman's interest. I want to caution us against being diminishing of something that women take interest in. And it's not exclusive to women. Men can like astrology too. But I feel a little defensive of being quick to criticize something as being of lesser value, of being of little substance, or like lacking intellect for having an interest in this thing. Because I feel like we do it around women's interest in reality TV shows too. Men enjoy them as well. But
that's so true.
I don't think something has to have huge cultural value or significance for you to enjoy it. I think it's okay to just enjoy things, and we shouldn't be really hard on people for enjoying what they enjoy. And there's, I think, some respect too to the people who are like actually into astrology and understand it as a field of study, that I want to pay them some respect to in inviting everybody just to be respectful back.
I think it's so interesting. And, you know, I think there are a lot of things in when I look at like my signs, my chart, that there are a lot of things that are not right, you know, and sometimes I just take them and believe them because I'm thinking, okay, well, that's my sign. And you know what, that kind of is true. But it's also, you know, it's kind of comforting in a way to read something that's like, okay, you're this sign and you act this way, and this is how you engage with other people and who you get along with and why. And I think it's fun to take that and not to just completely believe it, but to take it and actually explore what it means and if those things are true and who you get along with more and why.
It'll resonate for some people. It's in alignment with what you feel is correct. And I feel like that's true of so many people's belief systems generally, that it just feels right to you. It resonates with you in some way. And it's just a tool to kind of guide what you already feel to be true about the world around you, a tool to understanding it. And to set the table too for Astrology 101, when we talk about it, we often talk about the sun sign. And we'll even refer to a person's big three. An astrological chart is made up of so many different signs, houses, and they represent different things, but we are really only going to talk about the big three, which is the sun sign, the moon sign, and the rising sign. And the sun sign is kind of your core self identity, and that shows up in your life purpose or your long-term goals or your default personality that feels truest to you. Your moon sign is typically associated with how you process your emotions and your inner world. And your rising sign is often associated with first impressions and how the world receives you and kind of how the world perceives you. And so I think those three different things will be interesting in how we talk about the astrological makeup of this AFS team. But first, I must know, Chloe, do you know your big three?
So what's funny about this actually is that I think the reason I know somewhat about this is because Snapchat asks for your birthday and like what time you were born and everything, and then it gives you your entire chart. So I had to look at my Snapchat.
That's okay.
Obviously, I know Sun, I'm a Leo, which is, you know, they love the attention, big personality, really, really talkative. I think it's true in some ways. It's hard because a lot of people, you know, when they think of Leos, they just think of, you know, always grabbing the attention from everybody else. So I hope that's not true in these cases. Moon is in Pisces.
Oh, I love Pisces.
Yeah, so this is where I don't really know what it means. That's, you know, my extent is kind of just knowing that I'm a Leo, but kind of what it said was I can get lost in my own fantasy world and I'm artistic, and then I'm rising in Scorpio.
I love that. That's a spicy water sign.
It says when I meet people, I tend to be either charming or disinterested. It's like, okay, right to the point.
Stop. That's actually incredible. I feel like I had Nathan McKinnon some here. He's a Scorpio rising as well.
That makes so much sense. Me and Nathan McKinnon are basically the same person, so.
I don't know what Jesse is pointing at. Oh, hello,
the
Abby.
That's on. How do I find my big three? So if you go into Snapchat, that's the easiest way because I think most people have Snapchat. I think you have to put in the time that you were born, which I'm not. I think I kind of guesstimated on my time a little bit. But then it'll tell you your entire chart.
Yeah, the birth time is an interesting component because it's hard to know someone's big three without knowing their birth time. So you also have to kind of guess, which is probably not in alignment with like how astrology should be done. But if you don't know your birth time, you can try and guess the time of day. It's just to see exactly where the stars were at with respect to your time zone, the day that you were born. This is amazing. You're a Sagittarius moon. I don't know a lot about Geminis, but you're a rising Gemini. I think you love Bo Byram, Abby, and I think he's a Gemini. So it's probably because you have a sun and rising shared. Pisces moon pals. I don't know what it means, but I also have that. I love this. First of all, if you guys do want to look up your big three and share them in the chat, I love Pisces people. I love Sagittarius people. I love Scorpio people.
What's so interesting is that I am friends with mostly Leos.
That kind of makes sense because I am an Aries. I'm not a Leo, but I know a lot of Leos, and I feel like fire signs stick together. They band together in a lot of ways.
It's chaotic when we're together, that's for sure, yes.
I could see that. There's a lot of energy, a lot of passion. I feel like your Pisces moon probably balances you out a little bit too. A little water, a little bit of fire. I think that's a really good mix.
That's good.
All right, let's dig into the mix of the Avs. Here's the context for why we're even doing this. When the Avs won the cup, I looked at the sun signs of that team, and there was a perfect elemental split captured throughout the whole of the lineup. So that means there was equal fire, air, water, and earth captured in the 2022 team. And I think that is something interesting about the quite literal balance that they struck in how that team was constructed.
I mean, there's no way that's a coincidence. Maybe it
Chris
could be.
McFarland doing their charts.
Imagine if Chris McFarland is sitting back there looking at all of them. But maybe,
Nate, what time were you born?
Maybe that's something we have to explore when they're, maybe if they trade somebody else. Maybe they're trading Casey Mittelstadt to look for somebody that is a little less earthy. I don't know. You never know. You really never know.
You really never know. It's something I've been thinking about too. Right now, the current Avs roster is not as balanced. I'm a child of the spring equinox.
I don't know what that means.
Which explains a lot. Bigley, you might have to help us on that one.
Yeah.
I don't know what it means. It sounds powerful, though. A little less earthy. No, Abby, it's really real. The Avs are not balanced at the moment, you guys. They have a lot of earth, a lot of fire, and very little air and water, which makes the Mikko trade a little bit sad because he was a Scorpio, a water sign that has only hurt their water representation in the big picture.
Yes.
All right, I'll go line by line. I shared this doc with you too if you want like a visual of what I'm about to say.
Yes.
And I put it by line. And so these are projected lines, but the top line with Artturi Lehkonen, Nathan MacKinnon, and Martin Necas
I just need everybody to know that I just opened up an entire spreadsheet to this. So Megan really did her homework. I love this. This is great.
Lehkonen is a Cancer sun, water sign. Nathan MacKinnon, a Virgo, very earth sign. And Martin Necas, a Capricorn. Jonathan Drouin, an Aries. Casey Mittelstadt, a Sagittarius, fire. Val Nichushkin, Pisces, water. Juuso Parssinen, Aquarius, air. Jack Drury, Aquarius, air.
Oh, nice.
Ross Colton, a Virgo, like Nathan MacKinnon. I just want to plant this seed for later. Like, for some reason, the Virgos on this team, at first glance, really seem different to me. So I want us to start thinking, like, what did Nathan MacKinnon and Ross Colton possibly have in common? Miles Wood, also a Virgo. Parker Kelly, a Taurus. Logan O'Connor, a Leo. Respect. And Joel Kiviranta, an Aries. All right. Back end gets interesting. Cale Makar is a Scorpio. Devon Toews
makes no sense.
A Pisces. He has a spicy water sign.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, he's probably got like a Pisces moon or something. I don't know. And Devon Toews is a Pisces. Both water signs. Sam Girard is a Taurus. Josh Manson is a Libra. Calvin DeHaan is also a Taurus. Sam Malinsky, a Leo, Keaton Middleton, Aquarius, Oliver Shillington, another Taurus. Okay. Both the goaltenders are fire signs. Mackenzie Blackwood is a Sagittarius and Scott Wedgwood is a Leo. I do think there's something fun around both the goaltenders being fire signs because fire signs are often associated with confidence, energy, passion, even a little bit of explosiveness. They're energetic and bold. And I do think not necessarily in how they play their position that comes through, but I think their communication style and how they show up as personalities in the locker room kind of loans itself to that.
I completely agree. I think fire signs, you have big personalities and they need to be big in net. So
Peter, man, I love this because we're going to dig into Nate's big three a little bit more and it might resonate even past what already feels similar that about Nathan MacKinnon as an intense person and a competitor.
Right.
But I love the all-fire goaltending. I think that was a really solid decision, Chris McFarland. Only fire sign goaltenders for the future.
Chris McFarland did that correctly, so cheers to him.
He's doing their charts. I think, too, with the earth signs, let's kind of start there. This is, when you think of earth signs, you think of grounded. Disciplined, structured, reliable. I think on the side of the defenseman being made up of so many earth signs, in particular Taurus, I think that they can be defensive minded, but might lack dynamicism, offensive creativity. And this was a critique I had of the back end when Jesse and I talked about what the Avs might need to shore up the defensemen is I think they're getting the contributions of offense from Makar and Taves. And that's enough probably to carry any NHL team. But I feel like I usually see more offensive contributions than I've seen this year from the rest of the back end, from a combination of Girard and Manson. And I do feel like that has been a little bit lacking. And when I look at kind of where I feel they need to improve on, I do think what Josh Manson brings to the table needs to be represented in some way. That physicality that he brings is so important. And so Middleton absolutely brings that. I think when I start thinking about it, they all do kind of have the stay-at-home defenseman mold in DeHaan and Middleton. Manson isn't necessarily that because he wasn't supposed to just be that. He was supposed to have more dimension. He's obviously struggled this year, but I do wonder if this earth sign heavy defense is costing them.
I mean, I think and I'm biased, but having, if you have fire signs, that means in a way you have a little more firepower. And I think that is exactly what they're missing right now. I think yes, they are reliable, they're grounded, but also they're lacking that energy that they need on the back end.
More energy.
Yes.
More passion. I think too, so like we talked about Sam Malinsky, he's a Leo. He's the only fire sign in the decor right now.
Yes.
So there's a lot of pressure on him to return from this break mentally reset.
Yes.
Because he's the only fire sign representation. I think he needs to bring some of that passion. And when I talked about being multidimensional and offensive creativity, I'm looking at Sam Malinsky.
Yes. I think the only reason why we haven't seen him step into that is because he's still very young.
You're right.
So I think as time goes on, if they stick with Malinsky's second or third pair, we'll see a little bit more of that firepower come out of him. But for now, he's a little young, so he's still kind of growing.
I think that's an interesting thing around astrology too, is when you read about it, there's like evolved versions of your astrology. Like there's an evolved Leo has these traits, and maybe unevolved these traits, like in a young person who's still developing, might show up in a slightly different way. And so I think that could be true of a young Leo who is still figuring out the league. But I do think when looking at the earth sign representation on the back end, Sam Girard, a Taurus, has been exactly what you need him to be. He's stable. He's reliable. He's killing penalties. He's making smart decisions. And I just don't know that the rest of it has evolved to be that the way that Sam Girard has this year. And so I think they need to step outside the box, either a little bit more air, a little bit more water, but Scorpio, Pisces, Makar, and Taves are definitely doing a nice job of that. So maybe more fire. Let's look at McKinnon. He's the Virgo, and I think he is super interesting. Let's look at strengths and weaknesses of a Virgo hockey player. Strengths: elite work ethic, high hockey IQ, and attention to detail. Virgos are associated with being kind of the type, like, perfectionist sign. They can be really hard on themselves, and they can be hard on other people because of that attention to detail. I think that can translate to two-way responsibility, which, it's one of those things with McKinnon. Evolved McKinnon, like 2022 playoffs, was very good in his own end. There's a precision in skating, passing, and shooting because of that attention to detail, and ultra competitive with a drive to improve, I think, because of that kind of perfectionist tendency. The weaknesses, though, can be overly critical of themselves and others. They can overthink plays. They can overthink things. That perfectionism can lead to frustration, and they might struggle to let loose and play instinctively. And they can be impatient with teammates who don't match their intensity. I think with McKinnon, too, digging into his big three, he's a moon in Scorpio, and that is a person who seeks out emotional intensity. Their deep-seated need for transformation and rebirth can manifest itself in the lives of a Scorpio moon in different ways. Most have powerful, emotionally intense lives, though.
So I just need to ask you one question, though. Did you figure out what time all of these players were born to do this?
No, so I'm guessing. And so his rising is what is affected by the guess. The moon sign, we know, I think.
Okay. For a second, I was thinking about it, and I was like, hold on.
Chris McFarland, I need the birth times of your players.
I need every single birth time of every single player.
And Scorpio, so he's Scorpio moon and Scorpio rising, by the way.
Okay.
So a Scorpio rising is kind of how the world receives you, and a Scorpio rising person is a person that presents themselves in a manner that commands respect, and in some cases, fear.
Let's go, Nathan McKinnon.
Let's go, Nathan
me and you.
McKinnon. I wanted to quickly go to Jonathan Drouin.
Okay.
And his big three, because I wondered how this person that I've just described gets along with Jonathan Drouin, who is an Aries. Aries sun, Pisces moon, Cancer rising, and I added one more. He's a Leo Mars. Mars is the house of conflict, like resolution or your approach to conflict. And I think having a Leo Mars gives a person like Jonathan Drouin a little bit more fire to stand firm and up to strong people. But the Pisces moon, Cancer rising really softens the whole, because Aries as a sun sign is the sign of the ram, and it can be associated with being like quite stubborn and bullheaded.
Interesting.
But as an Aries sun myself, I also don't necessarily feel that way. The Cancer rising, it's a water sign, is associated with undeniable ability to make people feel safe and comfortable around them. And I associate Pisces moon people with having really high emotional IQs and sensitivity to what other people are thinking, being very perceptive to that. And so when I think of Jonathan Drouin's big three, I think he's perfectly equipped to absorb the intensity of someone like Nathan McKinnon.
Yeah.
I feel insane.
No, it's good. I mean, it is a sort of balance. If it was, I don't even know who they don't get along with, but if they were just butting heads the whole time, it wouldn't work that way. So I think it's good that he kind of can understand that.
And balance out Nathan McKinnon, because you'll see on the ice sometimes, like Nathan McKinnon, the intense outbursts that he can have. Jonathan Drouin's been on the receiving end of a little bark or a little snippy comment before, and he has zero reaction to it. Like, he understands, I think, who Nathan McKinnon is as a teammate, and just doesn't overreact to it, and can handle it in the perfect way to kind of, what's the word, like when you not dismantle a bomb, when you Diffuse.
Diffuse.
He could diffuse Nathan MacKinnon's intense personality.
I'm laughing at all of these comments. Virgos lock in.
I feel targeted and I'm taking notes. You need a jokester to balance the mood, like a Scorpio sun, Mikko Rantanen. Ugh. I actually don't I associate Sagittarius with being kind of the silly, goofy ones, but Mikko Rantanen was certainly silly, goofy, and I do think that genuinely helped to round out the top of that lineup in a lot of ways. Let's look at our fire signs then. Yes. Because this is the second most represented group, and it's because the goalies are kind of doing some heavy lifting there. But that was Logan O'Connor, Jolke Viranta, Casey Mittelstadt, Sam Malinsky, and the goaltenders.
And I just want to point out that in each of the groups, they have at least one Leo.
I think that's important. I wonder if we don't have enough Leos.
I have a point on that I'll wait to get to a little later.
I'm so excited for this. Do they have enough Leos? I am a little biased. I'm a fire sign myself, and my big three is Aries Sun, Sagittarius Moon, Aries Rising. So I'm actually triple fire sign. And so I love fire signs. And I think that when you look at the whole of a chart, they can be balanced out by a lot of different placements. But I have no issue with the fire sign representation in the lineup. I found it interesting that Duran was an Aries Sun like myself, because I feel like Jonathan Duran. He's very calm, and I don't associate him with the ram and the bullheaded tendencies, but I think he's just a really evolved representation of an Aries.
I think in a way, I know you said it was very balanced out when they won the cup, but I think in a way fire signs can be better for teams like this because it brings the energy that they need.
I think so too. Is this the Leo point, or do you want to wait for it? We can wait for it.
I can bring up the Leo point.
Let's go.
So, here's a little fun fact. Me and Sidney Crosby have the same birthday.
Whoa!
August 7th is my birthday. That is also his birthday. I don't know the year, which probably doesn't matter. So, yes, he's a fire sign. He will bring a little more, and that might be a little top heavy, but he's a Leo. And I think it's important to know which fire sign you are, because I think especially with him and Nate, they get along so well, and I need to know how they get along so well with Sidney Crosby also being a fire sign and being a Leo.
Ooh, that's interesting now that Nate gets along well with two fire sign people, and now Duran and Sidney Crosby. I think it just means that you need to have fire sign representation on the top line playing alongside him, because when the Avs won the cup, the top line, I'm really looking at like the three-headed monster to be more specific. One earth, one water, one fire.
Okay.
And I look at MacKinnon's obviously locked in as the earth. The fire was Landy, and the water was Mikko. And that's so right. I think this fire sign call out is kind of important to recognize why MacKinnon might just play very well with fire signs.
They need somebody on the first line that can fulfill the shoes of a Landy. And who better to do that than Sidney Crosby?
Right. End of the show. That's how we've addressed what the Avs need for the trade deadline. I do love this, Vic Holland. Wait, so we do need Sid? Yes. Astrology told me that we do. It's really important. I think this earth, fire, water mix is important to replicate. It's not replicated right now on the top line. It's water, earth, air. So, no, water, earth. So,
but I'm not worried because McFarland already knows this. And he knows that Sid would be a good fit because of his sign, because he's looking at all of their charts.
He's looking at all their charts.
So I'm not worried because McFarland's got it.
Fire, earth. Oh my gosh. Interesting. If Martin Etchus can become the Avs 2C and play between Dren and Nichushkin, that line would be earth, water, air. No, actually, it would just be fire, earth, water, which is still a great blend. It's still a great blend. I think the Avs do need more Leos, Chloe. And
I'll come play.
I think that when we look at the trade deadline, this is something important to consider. One, if we look at shoring up the defenseman group, they shouldn't add any more earth signs. I'm done with the earth signs. I'm not impressed.
We're going to have to do an emergency pod if they come back and trade for an earth sign.
This is not a good fit. This is not a good fit, but they do need to shore up the D group. So that is still important. I also would consider for a depth forward addition an air sign, because I do think that they need more depth scoring. And I think in looking at the bottom of the lineup, the things that they do well, they're very responsible. I think that they bring energy. I'm looking at Ross Colton. We were talking about intensity around Nathan MacKinnon. Ross Colton's also a Virgo. I do think that it manifests in a slightly different way, but I do think that's part of Ross Colton bringing the energy. And, you look at a Leo like Logan O'Connor, and he certainly is, I think he embodies leadership qualities and has become a little more vocal in the room now that he feels comfortable in his role. But I just think we're missing a little bit of air sign representation because of the playmaking possibility of air signs. I think that they have creativity and operate off of instinct, and that could be a really nice addition to the depth of the Avs lineup.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
I was trying to contain thoughts, but I have no thoughts at this point because there's so much going on. I just need to know now everybody who they could possibly trade for, what their signs are. That's what I'm thinking about.
Brad Marchand is a Taurus. Now, I said no signs on the back end.
Interesting.
But if he played with Druin and Nichushkin, that would satisfy the earth, water, fire combo. Interesting. Ryan O'Reilly is an Aquarius, which is an air sign. So that would still satisfy my need for air signs for the playmaking upside. Though Ryan O'Reilly, I think that aspect of his game is a little different from what it once was. Don't think it's half bad. Seth Jones is a Libra, which is exactly what Josh Manson is. And I don't think that's what I want for the Avs back end, for example. Carson Soucy, a name that Jesse mentioned on the show yesterday, is a Leo, and I do think that the back end could use some fire sign representation, so I don't hate it from an astrological perspective. But I think that kind of rounds out where the Avs are at. They're not totally balanced at the moment. They have some work to do with the deadline, and I hope Chris McFarland knows everybody's birthdays.
I hope so too. And the time that they were born.
Just ask their moms. They should know. I feel bad I glossed over our water sign and air sign peoples, but the water signs, these are intuitive people. They can be, fluid in their play too. I think they're adaptable in that sense. Because of that high emotional intelligence, I think it was Drew and we were talking about this with too, who had the Pisces moon, was it? Jonathan? Let's see. Cancer rising and Pisces moon. Of course it is. High emotional IQ people. So I do think that they have strong instinct and a great perception. They're great at understanding their teammates. And our air signs, I think they're communicative. They're fast thinkers. I think they could be strategic. And that's where I go back to where they could maybe help with playmaking, vision, and distributing the puck. And why I might want a little bit more air sign representation at the bottom of the forward group.
Next time, when everybody's back and you guys are at practice, I'm fully expecting you guys to ask when they were born and what their sign is.
What's your birthday? No, what time?
Yeah, I don't care about the day. I want to know the time.
I've heard that's such a red flag too. Is the minute a man is asked their birth time, they know what's happening. They know exactly what's happening. Peter, man, I love that you looked up Ferraro because I did too. And he's in my notes as a Virgo. And I know I said no more earth signs on the back end, but I still like Mario Ferraro for the Avs. If he's a Virgo the way that Nathan MacKinnon's a Virgo, then I don't hate it. Because right now the earth sign representation on the back end is Taurus. So Virgo would still be a little bit different. If he has some of that intensity that Nathan MacKinnon or Ross Colton has, pause. Miles Wood, also a Virgo. So I thought, okay, interesting. what does a Miles Wood have in common with a Nathan MacKinnon?
Oh my god.
At first glance, it doesn't really seem like much, right?
Wait, and Ross Colton.
And Ross Colton, because I can see the
weird?
similarities between MacKinnon and Ross way more.
Okay.
And I can see then, okay, maybe why Ross Colton and Miles Wood get along is because they relate to each other in a big way. But I was curious with Miles Wood why he feels so different from the other two. And maybe it's because he's having a tough year. Like, I think maybe the earlier versions of Miles Wood that didn't struggle to the same degree as he has this year. He's a Taurus moon and he's a Scorpio rising. And I think that Scorpio risings, which has come up a couple of times here, I think MacKinnon's also a Scorpio rising. That is that presence that's not to be pushed around. And so I think Miles Wood manifests a little bit differently than the others, but I do think there is certainly that like sense of not being pushed around in the way that Miles Wood plays hockey.
I can see that.
I didn't do Ross Colton's big three, but I have to imagine it's really compatible with whatever Miles Wood has going on.
Two Virgos. Are Virgos compatible with each other? Because
you know what? I have no idea. But now I'm super curious why Miles Wood and Ross Colton get along so well. And why, for Nathan MacKinnon, I think he gets along best with the other fire signs. But you know what? The Roaring 20s with Logan O'Connor, a Leo, a fire sign. There's something about this Earth-Fire combination that's very real.
I love it.
All right, we'll stop talking about the astrological makeup of the Colorado Avalanche, but we won't stop thinking about it.
I will never stop thinking. Now that we've talked about it, this is going to be a question that I have for everything I think of.
We were going to introduce a new segment at the end of the show, but I don't want to blow through it and rush through it.
Oh, no. I think we can... I don't even know what time it is. Oh, no. I don't even think...
It's a good way to wind it down.
It's short, too. We'll bring it back for other segments, so
do you want to introduce it, Chloe?
Sure.
Okay.
So, when was this? On Friday? I think this was on Friday. I saw a video of Brad Marchand, and it was after him playing in the Canada game, and he came into the locker room, and he said, I might be the biggest fan here. And I absolutely loved that. But in all the comments that I saw, it was people saying, let's be real. The only reason we don't like him is because he's not on our team. So I told Megan we need to do a segment that's called, do we actually hate this player or are they just not on our team?
Yes.
And that's about it.
I think it's good too. And the players that we're going to start with are JT Miller and Brad Marchand. Honestly, I know we did our first episode on JT Miller, but I think seeing him in the Four Nations tournament alongside Team USA gave me a slightly different perspective. And similarly, Brad Marchand, like getting to see him on this stage and how he interacts with his teammates. I never didn't want Brad Marchand on my team, but it just reinforces why I would want him on my team, seeing him alongside Team Canada and hearing the way that he talks about other players, to include the way that Cale Makar talks about him. I think that is a locker room presence that makes a lot of sense.
When I was first introduced to him, and it was just seeing videos of him licking people and trying to kiss
that was
him.
unevolved Brad Marchand.
But a lot of people, like, I think when it was described to me, it was like, he's a rat and he's licking people and kissing them.
Licking people.
But I absolutely loved it. It was like, this guy's a menace. This is absolutely hilarious. And honestly, I think like he is the exact version of what we're talking about, because when he's on your team, he's a leader, he's a playmaker, but he's dedicated. He's dedicated enough to lick sweaty people. So,
he's dedicated enough to lick sweaty people might be the most insane thing we've said today, and we've said a lot of insane things.
But he's the king of towing the line, and it's the chirps, the cheap shots, the licking, but he backs it up. He's not just a troll, he's actually a top tier player. And I think that's, at the end of the day, He's just dedicated to winning at all costs. And, whether it's from his skill or just from this absolute gremlin behavior that he has, he does whatever it takes. And you hate it when he's the enemy, but you love it when he's on your team. So, would I take him to be on the Avs? Yes, I would.
It's an easy yes for me. Sometimes I think about with hockey, if they ever on the ice are thinking of different strategies just to add a competitive edge to their game, like, do they ever just scream to kind of alarm everyone around them, throw them off a little bit? And when I look at the way Brad Marchand has acted in the past, all right, set aside the licking because that's a bridge too far. We can acknowledge the licking is a bit too much, but I do love a brand of hockey player that almost like forgets he's a hockey player in ways too and does things outside of the normal mold of hockey player. Because I think that these are guys who do have personalities and kind of have it trained in them to be less individualistic because hockey is such a team sport. It requires unity. That is important. But I think it's also important for them to be a little weird sometimes and to just kind of step outside the hockey player mold. And Brad Marchand does that. I think it could be an interesting strategy. I don't even know if he doesn't do it on the ice. Like, just scream.
Oh, I thought you were saying, like, you're wondering if he does it off the ice, like if he licks people off the ice. And I was like, gosh, I hope not. I can't even remember what I was gonna say after that now that I'm just thinking about him licking people. Oh, it is a strategy. I mean, it's gotta be. And it bothers people so much that it takes them off of their game. And that's the whole point. You want a guy like that on your team because he can get in your opponent's heads. And that is the best strategy that you could possibly have.
It's true. Not everyone can deploy it effectively, too. And Brad Marchand has such a great pulse for what's going to annoy people. And that is a skill that I can appreciate. JT Miller, I don't have a lot of notes on JT Miller. Here's where I'm at with him. I did like in the USA game where they're clearly depleted last night. I did like seeing him trying to guide his team in the final push that actually brought Team USA pretty close to tying this thing. And I just liked the leadership that I saw from him in this moment. And I have to imagine that's something that people who follow the teams he's been on more closely, that you can come to appreciate about him. And so I want to give him some credit for those things. But I still worry on the Avs side of it, specifically that what he is, it's so similar to Nathan MacKinnon in intensity, but it's also different in a way that I think if this like misfires and they butt heads in any way, it is explosive. And I don't think it would be tenable. And I'm too worried. It's like a high wire act and it just feels way too risky because it clearly, the communication styles, it clearly didn't work in Vancouver with certain teammates, that I just think it's too volatile. It's too much of a ticking time bomb that though I see why people do like him and want him on their team, I don't want him on the Avs specifically.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I do think, I love his leadership style, but after everything that has happened in Vancouver, you're a little weary of adding him to a team like this because you don't know how it's going to work out. And if he was really the problem in the locker room, you never know. So this one's a hard one because this is where it gets a little crazy when you're thinking about, do you hate him? Not hate. Hate is such, like, I don't want to say hate, but do you just dislike him as a player or is he just not on your team?
Yes.
I don't know. That one's a hard one.
You're right, because I don't think I hate him as a player. I think I would dislike him more as a teammate, like on the team that I cover. I don't think I would dislike him media to player. I don't think I would dislike him in what he's done on the ice.
Yes.
I just think I'd worry about the compatibility of him in the locker room. He's a Pisces sun, a Sagittarius moon, and a Cancer rising. I'm not even kidding. You guys, I didn't reveal this, but when we did the first episode, I looked up Pettersson's chart and Miller's chart just out of curiosity.
I was hoping that you did that because I was thinking that in the middle of our conversation.
And there were some interesting results in terms of why these two were not compatible. But I think that Sagittarius moon for JT Miller is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in what I have come to know about him as a teammate. I don't think it's inherently bad. I just don't know that I'd like it on the Avs.
I completely agree. I think that these are two players where JT Miller, I think I would not like him on the team. So he's a player that maybe I just dislike in general, not just because he's not on the team. But Marchand, I think he is a player that most people just dislike because he's not on the team. But for me, it's, I feel like I always sort of liked him until he played the Avs.
I'm excited because we didn't like really dunk on or hate the people today, but there are some people that I very vehemently feel I don't like him and I would not want him on my team.
That's perfect, and we can bring that back.
We'll save him for another day. It'll get more controversial than this. I wanted to shout out a few comments too. Jonathan McMillan, as a Virgo, I'm a firm believer in if there's smoke, there's fire, and JT Miller being toxic for the room seems accurate. When I was learning about Virgos last night, I learned that they're very good at clocking other people for what they are and being able to see through them. So one, I trust your judgment, Jonathan. I trust Nathan McKinnon's judgment. He wanted Andrew Cogliano on this team for a reason. And there was another player similar to that.
Sidney Crosby.
Oh, I'm just kidding. No, you're right. And so I trust Nate's judgment in terms of identifying what the team might need and want. And honestly, anyone that Nate might not really like or gravitate towards, I'm suspicious.
No,
as to why.
Me too. Especially now knowing that me and Nathan McKinnon are both rising in Scorpio.
Yes.
Scorpio. Now I know that we are similar in that way, so I trust him a lot more.
I also wanted to shout out Alyssa's earlier comment. Alyssa looked up the most zodiacs featured in captains. It's Virgo and Leo.
Interesting.
Does that make a lot of sense? Nathan McKinnon for captain? I'm just kidding. Just kidding, you guys. That's a joke.
That one does make sense. See, exactly what I was saying about Leo's got to be the center of attention, and then every conversation we've had, I turn it back to Leo's.
And to Sidney Crosby coming to Colorado as the next captain of the Colorado Avalanche.
It's perfect.
I don't know what I did to Landeskog in this situation.
Oh,
no, he still exists.
You can have co-captains.
You can have co-captains. I love this.
Yeah. It's just one is playing and one is not. You need one that's playing. So, Sidney Crosby, if you're listening, please.
The Avs need you.
So true.
Okay, you guys. I'm so excited to talk about more people that we might not hate just because they're not on our team or vice versa. But that's going to do it for the astrological makeup of the Colorado Avalanche. And I hope that you had fun today because I did.
I did too.
Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back Friday with an off-ice show to talk more about Four Nations Faceoff and the deadline. Vaguely sober, I will be checking for this every day until it arrives. I hope it's here by Thursday so I can wear it for our unofficial watch party that we're having at Jesse's house.
At Jesse's house. In his bedroom.
Whoa.
That went a little too far. I was more thinking like the most like
invasive place
is your bedroom. But that came off so wrong.
Cut the cameras. It's time to go. I love you.